I'm Jennifer from Shabby Fabrics. Today I'm going to show you how to make a kaleidoscope block. This beautiful quilt is called the One Fabric Kaleidoscope Quilt using the Winter Twist collection from In the Beginning Fabrics. And isn't it beautiful? All of the blocks, including the border, are literally out of one fabric. There's one other fabric, that's the cream, and then binding. It's incredible how the quilt looks super complex, like you used a variety of fabrics, and none of that is actually the case. It's very simple. Let me show you how. Again, we're using the Winter Twist collection, and I have limited yardage here only because this is sample yardage only. In the kit, of course, this is available as a kit, you will get 4 yards of this fabric. Cut that piece into two 2-yard pieces and put the first 2-yard piece aside. That's your outer border for later on. The other 2-yard piece, it will look like this. You'll have 4 very specific lanes. The pattern, which is very well written, by the way, we did follow the pattern, and that is in your kit. So this is not, I'm not going to take you through the entire journey of how to make this whole quilt. These are more tips and tricks how to make a kaleidoscope block and let you know specifically how we worked with this fabric. The pattern does have you cut your strips 9¼ inches as a minimum. We went ahead and just kind of shot the gap here of that cream snowflake and just went right in between that, and that's how we got our rows, and those end up being 9¾ inches. So I just wanted to mention that. Gave us a little bit more breathing room. If you've ever done a kaleidoscope quilt before, sometimes they'll have you layer all of those strips together as in all 8. Each one of these kind of pies, I guess I would call it, has 8 wedges, each at 45 degrees for a total of 360 degrees. Some kaleidoscope patterns and blocks I've seen have you stack up all 8 layers of fabric, cutting them all at once. You can absolutely do that. This particular pattern says go ahead and make 2 stacks of 4 fabrics. Obviously, 2-yard pieces would not fit on my table, so I have a very small section of the fabric I'm working with so that you can easily see what I'm doing. You want to go ahead and map out your blocks. Don't just start cutting. I really want to discourage you from doing that because you might end up not maximizing the fabric and might not get a design you really love. So the first thing for me, the excitement of kaleidoscope is no 2 quilts have to look alike. You can literally deviate from this pattern and have your blocks look completely different than this, or you can follow along and have your blocks look exactly like this. Let's say you want to do something completely different. There's a tool out there. It's called the Magic Mirror. It's from Marty Michelle. I love this. It's a lot of fun. When I first discovered this as a young quilter, I was so excited because I realized the potential of what the mirror afforded me. Now you'll use this in concert with this Creative Grids 45-degree kaleidoscope and Dresden plate ruler. And so when you open up the mirror, there's no limitation, right? It can open all the way up. Well, we're looking for a very specific angle. So if we put our ruler in there and close our mirror on top of that, have a piece of tape just coming over the top, this will now restrict the angle from opening beyond the 45. How we now use this is we can go to our fabric. Now, if you can see that from the side camera, as I move along, you will actually get an idea of what the blocks will look like. So let's say that you really like, let me turn this so you can see that better. Let's say that you like this spot, for example. You'd simply put your ruler into position, just like this, kind of lock that in, take this away, get your friction pen. I definitely recommend that you get the friction pen, and you'll simply trace all the way around. That's if you want to do something different than what they're showing on the cover. Let's say you fell in love with those blocks exactly like they are. What we figured out to figure out how people were achieving that is we simply put 2 pieces up to the actual pie or block to help isolate what does that wedge look like. And of course, that wedge, you'll want to cut in that exact position every single time. So in that instance, that's showing kind of an area over here, and it's getting some of the braid. I'm going to be working today, I really want to go for the poinsettia block. So in this instance, if I put that wedge up here, notice how there's no braid here. So it looks to me like rather than my ruler being like here, which is going to catch that braid, I'm going to be more kind of up in here. So notice how I miss the braid. So that just kind of studying that helped us figure out where we're going to go ahead and put our blocks. Now I'm going to draw that line because I like that spot. I can definitely put my mirror up there and understand what's that really going to look like. Am I going to be happy with that? But let's go ahead and draw that line. Now, because I have 2 stacks of 4, I'm going to make sure that for the next stack that I get that same exact position. And it looks to me like, yeah, definitely, that is basically right there. And you're looking for very specific, notice how it's like right there. You know, I'm going to lay out my ruler to try to hit that same spot. I'm looking for other places. Notice how it comes just inside that corner. You get the idea. Be very careful. Be very careful about how you draw this here and draw this here so that they're exactly the same. Once that's done, that's one of the most important things is very carefully mapping it out. But I also recommend you map out all of the blocks at the same time before you do any cuts at all. And that'll be all along that whole 2-yard piece. I want to point out to you that it appears as though there's only 5 blocks. That's what I thought at first. But keep in mind that these really do add up to a whole nother block. So when you consider the top, bottom, left, right, and the corners, there's actually 9 areas you need to map out. Map out all 9, and then, and only then, will you be ready to move on to the next step. Pinning the layers together is key. Otherwise, you're going to get shifting. You just trying to visually say, yeah, I think that's about stacked on top of the same fabric underneath it, is not going to work. Notice how we very carefully cut those and laid those out so we think that there's one stacked on top of the other. We're going to take it to another level, and we need flower head pins to do it because they lay nice and flat. Find places on where you're going to actually do that wedge, and let's say it's the very tip. Actually, I'm going to start I'll start here, and I'm going to do 3 sections. Now, I've noticed I've pinned these other ones. These are ready to go ahead of time. Here, I'm going to go ahead and find these, what we call landmark, that very tip of that. I'm going to come in here because this is very identifiable, right? There's no chance of you missing it. It's not subtle. It's a strong contrast. Here, like this. Then I want to wiggle this. I'm going to wiggle this. And I'm going to probably go, I think I can go to the side. Yes, notice how I drew this out. You want to make sure you don't have your pins extending across your cutting lines. That could go obviously very wrong. So let me just wiggle that again. I kind of shifted that around. Let's wiggle that. That should get everything lined up. Simply set the pin and leave it alone. Smooth things out. Now we're going to do it again. Now you won't be able to see that, but I'm going to be, let's say it's the tip of this. Now I'm looking for this again. Let me see if I can roll that back so you can actually see it. You get the idea that we want to do this in 3 sections, top to bottom, to make sure that nothing is shifting. There, and one more time. Here, I might run my pin vertically because I can see if I go to the side, I'm going to be in my cut line. So I'm going to go ahead now. Let me put this one aside just for the moment. This is where the spinning mat really helped. Keep in mind, we're just going to pretend all 9 are mapped out, right? All of that happened. This is where the spinning mat was invaluable. I don't want to move this fabric. The minimal amount that you shift, obviously I have to move it to the cutting mat. But after that, I don't want to move it again. Those layers can move and will move. So let's get everything nice and flat. Let's go ahead and put our ruler here. I'm just going to start this process. So I need to come up to it at some point, and we're just going to make this cut, and I'm going to put this gently off to the side. Now I'm going to stay with this spinning mat so I don't have to disturb the fabric. If I didn't have the spinning mat, I would literally be picking the fabric up and turning it, picking it up and turning it. I don't want to do that. That's when fabric gets off slightly. And slightly will add up, especially on a quilt like this. So before I take that away, I'm going to double check, did I get a good clean cut? Does anything need to be recut? A little bit in that corner looks like. Okay, and now we can unpin that, and let's start to lay out our block. And see how pretty this is. I just think kaleidoscope quilts are so cool. They look complex, and they're not. Just being very careful, following the steps we just followed. Now, I'm going to go to that very next stack of fabric, my other 4. I'm going to, again, find that sweet spot that I had identified and would have traced out. I'm going to cut that again, locating that very carefully. I'm going to cut that again. In fact, let's just do it together, right? Let's look at that sight picture one more time and make sure, are we actually mimicking that spot? Let's make sure we're at the right point, at the proper poinsettia. So you always want to confirm your position, right? To me, it's like, why did that not? Now let's look at that. What are my sight pictures? We talked about that. Just a little bit over here. So it's basically, notice that is about right. Almost literally almost right there. I can almost slip that fabric out. And let's see, are we right about there? Are we hitting everything just so? This is the process. It's slow, but we're being very careful. Mama says, you know what I'm going to say, measure twice, cut once. Now, if that pin is in my way, I'm going to go ahead and leave it in just for the moment while I trace. But then that'll be obviously coming out. So let's go ahead and trace this. One of the other reasons I love the friction pen is, let's say I miss this. Let's just trace this. And we're going to check this. This might happen. I think this is the spot. But let's say that we lay that piece back down there and we discover it's not the place. Let's just iron it away and start again. So let's look. If I put that wedge in there, would that complete my picture? I think it did complete my picture, so I'm satisfied with that. As I said before, this pin is going to be a little bit in the way, so I'm just going to rotate this a little, just slightly. You could even take it out all together and find a new landmark. But keep in mind right now, between that being in position, those two in place, and this in place, this isn't going anywhere right now. You don't have to worry about that. You just don't want to obviously cut that. Definitely damage your blade. Okay, so let's get that going. Let's make sure that's completely done. I felt a little bump. Let's just slide that out gently. That's the challenge. That's why sometimes I think pinning needs to happen a little bit later. When you know you're outside of your drawn lines or within your drawn lines, you just want to make sure you're pinning probably at that step. All right, do we have a nice clean cut? That's what I'm after right now. And we do. All right, so let's put that aside. Of course, you would be cutting all your other ones at the same time. We're working on one block right now. Let's get to the fun stuff. Not that this hasn't been fun so far, but that's a little more stressful, you know, making sure everything is just so. So we'll get everything lined up, all 8 wedges, making sure we didn't miss something. Now that the need for the flower head pins is gone, I'm going to put them aside. They're very sharp and they really have a very specific use. I don't want to worry about ironing over them, so I'm going to go back to the glass head pins from Clover that I love. Now that we have this, we're going to go ahead and start sewing things together 2 slices at a time. So we'll go ahead and bring right sides together. This is bias. One of the things I wanted to mention to you and should have mentioned to you before you even cut your strips, use the magic sizing. Give this fabric some body. It just helps stabilize bias in particular, which we're dealing with in a big way. This whole thing is bias at this point, and that means that this edge wants to stretch. So we have to just deal with it a little tenderly, gently, so that it doesn't distort. I'm just going to put a pin in place here because I don't want anything moving on me. I might put one more in place. I'm using a 1/4 inch foot. You do want to be very accurate on your seam allowance here. That pin's going to be in the way. I'm very gentle right now with this fabric. No tugging and no pushing. It just needs to be. We'll kind of open that up. Now I'm going to go ahead off camera and do this group of 2, this group of 2, this group of 2, of course. And we're going, let me do that. When we come back, I'm going to show you how pressing this now is a very important step as well. So I have my 4 wedges of 2. Now I want to make sure that you're always pushing the blocks, pressing the blocks to the right. So let's just start here. Let's start here so you know what I'm talking about. So let's press or set the seam and then to the right. And of course, we'll continue around, making sure you're going in the proper direction. Now, if you're tempted, as I was, totally tempted, to do the open seam, don't do it. It just seemed like when it came time, and I'll show you what I'm talking about here shortly, to do the next step of this, it kind of messed up the ability to understand how to put the 2 kind of hemispheres of this block together. So let's just keep pressing that to the right, and we'll do one more and we'll be ready to show you next. And notice how I keep setting the block up so it has the same sight picture to me. That way I can't inadvertently press it to the wrong direction. These types of, I guess I'd call them sewing habits or disciplines, helps me hopefully, you know, not make as many errors and have to seam rip as much. Not my favorite part of sewing. I've done plenty of seam ripping. All right, so we were very careful how we pressed and the direction to which we pressed. So you've got that half and we have this half, as you would expect, and we're going to do this together. Let's go ahead. Yep, let's go ahead and do those together. Put a pin. Notice how By pressing that, now I have interlocking seams. This one goes to the right, this one goes to the left. I'm just going to interlock that, and isn't that beautiful? I love that. I'm going to actually go like this. That way I don't have to take that pin out. It will be out of my way as I come down with my 1/4 inch seam. Same thing here. Let's check. Do I have interlocking seams? I absolutely do. I love that when a plan comes together. And when a plan doesn't come together, something's going wrong. Just stop and fix it, because the problem's not going to fix itself. That's what I figured out when sewing. If there's something that's not quite right, stop, correct, and go again. All right, let's sew this together. Make sure everything's stacked perfectly. It's bias, so I have to be very gentle. I can't just throw it around. And we can just keep sewing, can't we? No reason to cut our thread. That's called chain stitching. If you are unfamiliar with the term, you just kind of just keep going. And we'll keep pressing in the direction that we've been pressing. So let's look at that real quick so you know what I'm talking about. Of course, we'll set that seam, but as we open it, see how everything's already going that direction? We're going to keep going with that flow. Gently. Don't get crazy. None of this swishing back and forth. Not now, especially. Not with bias. You are pressing. Obviously, there's quite a difference between ironing and pressing. So let's look at what that looks like from the front. I want to make sure I didn't take a tuck there. Sometimes that happens where I just have a little bit of a tuck there. So sometimes that alone is a reason to double check and then smooth that out if necessary. Same on this side. Let's set that seam. Oh, how about we get rid of some pins first. In the early days of quilting, I couldn't figure out, what's all this pinning about? Can't you just hold it? Well, sometimes you can, and sometimes you just shouldn't. And this is one of those times where I just wouldn't recommend it. All right. Press that nice. Let's double check from the front. Did I take a tuck of any kind? It looks like not, but I'm still just get in there and make sure. All right, now I have my 2 hemispheres. As you would suspect, we will simply lay those right sides together. And again, look how my seams nest. That is a very important seam right there. That is a critical seam right there. I'm going to put a pin there that I do not have to take out. Most of the time in the past, I've pinned from over here. I'm discovering the logic of actually pinning on this side, because if it's here, it's in my way, right? When I come down that lane, I have to move that pin. I'm not comfortable sewing over pins. I know some people do, I don't. But here, that pin can stay in position, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. I know those need to come up together here. I'm going to probably do that as well, so I don't have to take that pin out. In fact, I'm going to pin everything so I don't have to take anything away. I can just keep those pins in position. That one might be a little bit close. Let's back that up. You get the idea. Notice I'm taking time. I'm either going to take time in pinning or time in seam ripping, and I know what I would rather do. I would rather take the time in pinning and get it right the first time. Plus, if you have to seam rip bias, you gotta be really careful, because that is a very stretchy fabric, and you can start, starting to get things kind of distorted if you're doing too much aggressive seam ripping. So let's do one more pin. let's take that here. That pin's a little too close. Back that up. And make sure those are lying nice and flat as I'm coming into the intersection of the two hemispheres. I'm letting this machine pull this along. I'm not pulling and pushing and yanking. I'm just kind of guiding. So let's have a look here. Let's see how well we did with regard to getting that center just so. So let's have a look. That's a beautiful thing. Now, as before, I press the seams to the side. Let's first set our seams. In this instance, I'll show you why you don't have the option of going to one side or the other. Let me just set the seam first. These seams are going, I don't want to go this way because that will create an unusual bump, and same with this. So for that reason, now with the final seam, open is your best choice. Let me go ahead and set that again. That cooled down. That's another thing I've learned in time. I never used to set my seam. It just seems like adding heat relaxes and helps the fabric go, helps the seam go in the direction in which you want it to move more readily. There's not as much resistance. It just seems to be more willing to go easy. And there's a lot of fabric coming together in that middle. So you might need to sit there in that middle for a little while with some extra heat and get that nice and open. Same down here. Let's see what we've got. Okay, and then I'm going to press it from the top too. So now we have one of our blocks almost. And the reason I mean almost is this thing is not square. How would I possibly sew this into a quilt? Well, the pattern tells you to go ahead, and that's where the snowflake fabric comes in, and you make corners for your block. So if I add a corner here, a corner here, let me do this more upright. So I'm going to line this up with this line so it's easier for you to see. You're probably like, that's not square either, Jennifer. And down here, that's how I square up my block. Now when you get ready to put the triangle on there, you will naturally have overhang over here. You can get as scientific as you want, or you can just eyeball it. Let me show you what I mean. I can lay that on there right sides together and say, that distance is the same as that distance. I'm satisfied with that. You could fold this fabric in half, do a little finger press, fold this in half, do a finger press, and then you marry up those two places and you pin. I'm going to pin from this side. I don't want that moving. Let's do that. I'm going to pin from here as well. And one down here. Let's go ahead and take that to our... And you do all four corners the same way. And I'd pin them all at once and just do it all at once. I'm just doing one to save time. Same process though. So let's have a quick look here. I'm going to set the seam and naturally press to the outside. Just push away. push that good and hard away. And then I can simply come in here, trim off my little dog ears. And there's the corner, and we would repeat that with the other 3, and that's how we have get our block all nice and square. You will repeat that for all of your other blocks, your 5 total blocks. Then in the corners and the top and the bottom, it's just fractions thereof. You can see here that it's 3 wedges put together and not 8. So you're following the same process, following the pattern. The pattern guides you along beautifully. Then you will sew, according to the pattern, all of your blocks in partial blocks together to create a unit. Now this unit, as you're seeing here, looks very strange. And as you can see, it's so large, I actually went ahead and cut that on the ground with my pressing mat and very carefully measured. And in the corners, when I got ready to go ahead and square up those corners, I used my 12.5-inch ruler in the corners, and that helped me make sure my corners are square as well. So now that the quilt top is all put together, that's when you go ahead, and now comes that other 2 yard of fabric that you have, and now it's time to go ahead and put your miter borders on. Now, we made a point of fussy cutting that 2 yard strip so that there would be a poinsettia residing right above, the center of that poinsettia is right above here in the corners. We put poinsettia there. Primarily we were looking to make sure that on all 4 sides, right where that kind of center of that semi-block sits, that we were positioned right above a poinsettia block. So you're going to kind of position those, and then of course, if you're unfamiliar with how to miter corners, be sure to watch the video at the very end of this video. There's nothing to it. Again, it's just good sewing habits and discipline will get you beautifully mitered corners every single time. So that's all there is to learning how to make the kaleidoscope block, and I hope you enjoyed learning that today.